This is draft season. Welcome, everybody. I am John Schmelk. It's all brought to you by Moody's, proud partner of the New York Giants. My co-host, as always, is Tony Pauline, and we're solo today, no guest, because it's a big show. We get to unveil Tony's top 25 in this year's draft. And, of course, we'll do the review of last week, the preview of next week. But, Tony, how tough was it to come up with your top 25 this year?
Outside of 15, it was difficult. I think a couple of things. This is a very uninspired draft. This is a draft where you really don't, having a top 5 pick, there's 2 or 3 players outside of that, it really falls off a cliff. As we've mentioned on this show, some of the positions that we thought would be strength, offensive tackle, for instance, has fallen off. The quarterback class has not lived up to expectation as it didn't last year. So the first 10 to 15 were kind of easy. And then the last 10, you lead from pick 16 to 25, it got a little more difficult. And the last 5 were really tough. And there are a couple of guys that I'll speak about that were left out of my top 25 that are in everybody else's top 25 list. And I'll get into exactly why I left those guys out.
Yeah, just 14 true first-round grades on Tony's list here of the 25 players. So it's one of those drafts. You can find talented guys, but this is probably not the best year to have a top 7, 8 pick where you're going to find, the type of elite blue chippers we've had in years past. We will get to that in just a second. But, Tony, we're here in the Hackensack Meridian podcast, so you'll keep getting better. Let's get to last week's games, and I'm going to start with the third one on your list because that was the biggest one this week in college football. Alabama and Oklahoma. Good game, back and forth. But Ty Simpson hit a little bit of a fork in the road for the first time. It got a little bumpy. Hit a couple speed bumps. And Oklahoma, who historically, not necessarily known for their defense coming over from the Big 12, they did a number on Ty Simpson and Alabama in this game.
And that's exactly what I said last week when we were previewing the game. How was he going to hold up against that Oklahoma pass rush, that Oklahoma defense, which is second in the SEC? Brett Venables has really turned it around. Credit to our friend Jim Nagy, who is the GM of Oklahoma, brought in a lot of good players. I think if you watch this game, it's fair to say, even though the numbers weren't the same, I thought Mateer played better than Ty Simpson. And Ty Simpson struggled with the pass rush. Well, last week when we talked about the Missouri-Texas A&M game, I said it was clear to me that Caden Key, the left tackle from Missouri that everybody has seemingly fallen in love with, is not a left tackle at the next level. I thought the same thing watching Caden Proctor this weekend. He is not going to be a left tackle in the NFL. I've always had him as a right tackle. That was solidified in my mind because Oklahoma was able to beat him off the edge. But Oklahoma blitzed up the middle. They ran corner blitzes, and they really got to Ty Simpson, who made some questionable throws. I'll say this about Ty Simpson. He is not a big quarterback. When you see him in that huddle, he is not a big hulking, strapping quarterback. Granted, oftentimes he's standing next to 360-pound offensive lineman that Alabama lines up. But when I went back and I looked, I think they had him listed at 6'2", 206 pounds, which probably means he's going to be about 6'1", combine training. Assuming he enters the draft, maybe 205, 206. He is not a big guy at all. Made some really nice passes, but also struggled handling the rush at times. But that Oklahoma rush was impressive as it's been all season long, and they didn't even have their top guy on the field.
Yeah, it's important in these games to see what a guy like Simpson does against top quality competition. Oklahoma, certainly that. Anything else in this game, Tony, that jumped out to you? Ty Simpson, by the way, the fans that didn't see it, 26 of 42, 326 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. We'll talk more about him. He is in Tony's top 25, so we'll get more on him a little bit later on. Anything else in this game jump out at you, Tony, between these two teams?
Yeah. I'm liking Deion Burks more and more, the receiver from Oklahoma. He's a scrappy little pass catcher, good route runner, not the biggest guy, but he plays big football, very reliable, very tough, and also doubles as a return specialist. There's a clump of receivers at the top of the strip or at the top of the position. And then I think Deion Burks of the receiver from Oklahoma really fits in nicely in that second tier.
Well, we'll stick with the receiver theme and go over to what was a big ACC matchup this week, Tony. Clemson and Louisville, a close game, a fun game. I'm not sure either team really wanted to win this game in the fourth quarter. It wasn't the prettiest football, but we did have a premier matchup between wide receiver Chris Bell for Louisville and Clemson cornerback Avion Terrell.
Big loss from a college football perspective by Louisville. I think there was, 2 missed field goals and a missed extra point, and they lost by a point. But, yeah, that was the matchup to watch, as I spoken about. And Bell had 5 catches for 79 yards. Terrell wasn't bad. 7 tackles, no pass breakups, no interceptions. But the fact that you could see that size mismatch when they were matched up, which was only a few times, or only a few times when I saw it, the fact that Chris Bell goes 6'1", 220 pounds, and Avion Terrell is 5'10", 5'11", 185, 190 pounds, you could see that size mismatch. And that really hurt Terrell when they were pitted up against one another. I think Bell continues to move up charts. I don't think he's going to be a first rounder, but I think he's going to be a solid day 2 pick. Talked about Deion Burks. I think Chris Bell of Louisville is in the second tier of receivers. Further proved it against Clemson.
No question about it, Tony. And one of those players will be in your top 25. You'll have to stay tuned and find out which one. All right, let's go over to the Big 10 matchup, pardon me, which we thought might be a little bit more competitive. Didn't turn out to be. Oregon blows out Minnesota. But, Tony, you were focusing in on a matchup in the trenches in this game.
Blew them out really from the get-go. I think Anthony Smith, the defensive lineman from Minnesota, who I am very high on, started off good. Now, Minnesota plays a 3-man line, and they don't really line a 4th guy up with his hand in the dirt often. He mostly stands over tackle. I was impressed by Smith's strength, because he was going up against Isaiah World. He was able to basically knock Isaiah World off the ball early in the game. I was able to hold his ground. And while Smith is known as a pass rusher, I thought he held up well against the run, or at least held up against Isaiah World, who started shaky, but then by the middle of the first quarter, really got it into gear. The guy is fundamentally sound, uses his hands and his arms well. The difference between Isaiah World this year and a year ago when he was at Nevada, he's starting to develop a nasty streak in his game. He's starting to really finish blocks, really bury opponents, which I didn't see him do at Nevada, which is going to be, I think, something big for him, because he's an athletic, mobile left tackle with long arms and decent feet. And if he gets that nasty in his game, that's just something else that scouts are going to point to as a positive.
And, Tony, this wasn't on your list, but I think it was an interesting game, so I want to talk about it very quickly. The unbelievable job that Texas A&M did. They were down in that game 30-3. They come back and score 28 consecutive points to win that game 31-30. And there were a couple guys in this game that I know we are going to talk about, so I don't want to get too deep into it. But Casey Concepcion, one of your guys, had a really nice game. So Cassius Howell had a nice game in this game as well. So I just thought Texas A&M, who a lot of people think might be the most talented team or the best team in the country. Ohio State fans would disagree with that, obviously, and so would Indiana fans. But probably right now the best team in the SEC. And, boy, South Carolina with Lenore Sellers really gave them a run for the money in this game.
Well, he did in the first half. They didn't show up the second half. And you mentioned Lenore Sellers, and I was thinking about this extensively watching the game and after the game. The way I feel about Lenore Sellers right now is similar to the way I felt about Drew Allar a year ago. He needs to return to college, but he needs to find another school, because I don't see any progress in his game at South Carolina. I don't know that the coaching is going to get better. I don't know that he's going to make a big leap. What does Ty Simpson do? Maybe there's an opportunity there for him in Alabama. Tennessee, you want a good quarterback coach? Josh Heupel. Aguilar, the quarterback at Tennessee. He's a 6-year senior. His eligibility's gone. That's another possibility.
Tony, how about if Lane Kiffin goes to Florida, right?
Possibly. I mean, Florida's got a talented young quarterback there that, I don't know if they think he's replaceable, but that's also a possibility. I would go, with what's his name, Ryan Grubbs at Alabama, if there's an opening there. Obviously, it works both ways. The player has to want to go there. The program has to want him. But I think, I think with Sellers, there's not a lot of talent around. Nick Harbor did have that nice touchdown pass when that whole issue with the trooper ensued when he ran up the tunnel. He's developing. They don't have a great offensive line. The receivers are hit and miss. I don't think there's going to be a big turnaround next year. I think Sellers He's got to go back to school, but he's got to find a different school. I don't see him making a big leap in his game at South Carolina next year. And you know what? Credit to that Texas A&M team, offense and defense, because the defense shut the South Carolina offense down the second half, and the Aggie offense just took advantage time after time again.
Yeah, no question about it. And, I think maybe going to Braun at Louisville, he does a real good job with quarterbacks. That'd be a spot I would consider too if I was Seller. So I'm with you. I think there's a lot of spots that he could find a little bit of help in. And South Carolina obviously has struggled in the SEC this season. Draft season is presented by Moody's, a proud partner of the New York Giants, uniting the brightest minds to turn today's risk into tomorrow's opportunities. Learn more at moodys.com. All right, Tony, let's get to your top 25 here. And it's funny, when I went through this list, and I have little notes on all these guys, and we're going to go one by one here, folks. We got time, a ton to do on the show besides this. And I have questions on all these guys that, they're not like minor things either. They're like real questions. And to have it on that many guys in this list, I think is, to your point, when you were talking about this earlier, what this draft class looks like. So let's start with the first guy on your list, and that's someone we've talked about at length, which is ironically something I'm going to ask you about on this program, and that's Ruben Bain out of Miami. Started the season on fire, 6'3", 275, a bigger defensive end, edge player. Could he move inside in certain situations? Maybe. Had 3 sacks this year, had 1 versus Syracuse last week, but he had it on 4 consecutive games before that without a sack. So it hasn't been as loud recently, and there are reports, I think Ryan Wilson said this to us last week, that he could have 32-inch arms. So there are questions with Bain, but he has been a very effective player this year.
Teams always want pass rushers in the draft. It's a priority position. I think Ruben Bain has really increased his stock more than anyone thought, where he was going to be in September. We're talking about Ruben Bain as maybe a bottom half of round 1 type of guy. Hasn't had the great statistics, but he's caused a lot of impact. He can come out of a 3-point stance. He can stand over tackle. You see the change of direction in the backside pursuit. You mentioned how you may be able to kick him inside. He'll play inside because he's a bigger guy. The arm length, to me, it's, not that huge of a deal. He's going to just have to learn to protect himself, learn to keep blockers off him, which he does a good job at on the college level. But you look at the ability to rush the edge. You look at the ability to play in a 3-man line as well. You look at the way he is progressing on the field and the way the rest of the class really hasn't lived up to expectations. That's why I think right now he's the number 1 player. And, before we go into this, I don't think there's going to be huge amounts of movement on the draft board as we get closer to April. I fail to see how a guy that's, in the 20s right now is all of a sudden going to jump up into the top 5 because it has been very unimpressive, very uninspired play, literally the first throughout the season.
I mean, I think somebody had to put it all together, right? They'd have to have maybe their team makes the college football playoffs. They have a great college football playoff run. Then they, are perfect with the All-Star games and the combine. But look, there's a lot of uncertainty here, Tony. So I think when there is uncertainty and nobody that has really firmly planted themselves anywhere, there is a chance for more movement. So we'll have to see how this goes as we move forward.
I think there could be some of them, but I don't think. I think the top 10 guys now. Let me put it this way: the people that we would grade as the top 10 prospects right now, at least 8 of them, if not 9 of them, will be the top 10 prospects come April.
Right. I think that's fair. All right, let's go to player number 2 here. And I think, again, it speaks to the class that you have a safety as your second highest graded player. Caleb Downs, 6 foot, 205 pounds, 46 tackles this year, a couple of interceptions. It's just a matter of how people value the position. That'll determine how high Caleb Downs goes. But, you probably have to go back to Kyle Hamilton for a safety that was this highly regarded and this talented. And Downs probably even has some more tools than Hamilton did.
Well, I agree with the second part of your statement totally. I don't agree with it so much in the sense that Caleb Downs is by default the number 2 player in the draft and on this class because it's such a poor class. We knew at the end of the 2025 draft that moving forward to 2026, I think everyone said that Caleb Downs was the number 1 player in their draft or number 1 player prospect on the board. So it's not a surprise because he is such a terrific player. Now, under the Matt Patricia defense, in Ohio State, he's been asked to do different things. He's been asked to take on not such a prominent role as the linebackers have, and he's done a good job of it. He hasn't made the eye-popping plays like he did a year ago, but he's not having any mental lapses. He's not having any breakdowns. And he's leading one of the best defenses in the nation that's got talent all around him. But I think he's been steady, and he's been asked to do things differently this year, and he's done them well.
All right, let's jump to number 3 on your list. That's Alvaro Reese's teammate. And Tony, the question I've written down for him, edge or off ball. He's only rushed the passer 89 times this year. He's 6'4", 243 pounds. He has 6.5 sacks, a couple of pass breaks up, 30 tackles. What is his role going to be? How do teams see him? Do they like him as a smaller edge player? Again, just 89 pass rushes this year. That is not a lot. We talked about it as an off-ball linebacker where he was extremely effective earlier in the year. So the fact, again, that he's this high, and again, you have questions, where does he fit? I think, again, that'll be, I think, on a team-by-team basis on how they view the player based on their system and how he can fit into what they do.
I think he's an off-the-ball linebacker that you can blitz when you need him to. I don't think I think you can't really pigeonhole him because he's shown himself really the past year and a half to be an ever-improving off-ball linebacker, outstanding instincts, outstanding discipline, yet he's effective when they ask him to blitz. And remember, Ohio State plays a 4-man line, so they're not really going to ask their linebackers to blitz or rush the passer all that much because they have a very good pass-rushing 4-man line. But Reese can, in fact, blitz and rush the passer when need to be. I think it's a good thing. I don't like, pigeonholing the guy. Say Brian Burns, who's on the Giants now. When he came out, you knew he was sort of a stand-up 3-4 type linebacker that can rush the passer. I think Alvaro Reese can do that. But on 3rd and 5, if you don't want him to rush, he can run with the tight end downfield, and he shows good ball skills, and he can stack the run on 1st and 2nd down. So he has all those things going for him. As you pointed out, he's inexperienced on the blitz. They don't need a blitz at Ohio State. They've got that 4-man line. Those 4 guys get after the quarterback. And like Caleb Downs, he's asked to do certain disciplines, and he does them very well. His improvement has been incredible. His improvement has been off the charts, really, as a leader of that Buckeye defense.
I was surprised, Tony. None of those Ohio State defensive linemen cracked your top 25. I know you're a big fan. That's the reason why I ask.
Not yet. Let's see what happens, but not yet. Jackson, of course.
Yeah. Let's go to player number 4. And now let's see. We've had in our top 4, Tony, we have a safety, inside linebacker, and a running back. These are the 3 lowest paid positions in pro football, by the way, just for the record. And that's Jeremiah Love out of Notre Dame. This guy stayed pretty steady as the number 1 running back. And Tony, I know early in the year you were a little concerned with his inconsistent play. I think he's kind of flatlined that out a little bit in a good way. He makes big plays, and he's been very consistent. He's been clearly the best back in the country.
His inconsistent play and his inconsistent use of Notre Dame because he wasn't carrying the ball that much. Yeah, I mean, he's been the man this year. The fact they got a freshman quarter, they got a younger quarterback, they've needed him to step up as opposed to last year when they had a veteran quarterback who was able to pull a rabbit out of the hat. Now most of it's on Jeremiah Love. He's been carrying this offense on his shoulders. He's an incredibly talented runner. You look at the body control, you look at the balance, the speed, obviously, the ability to break games open, but the ability to keep his balance off of hits and off of tackles and pick up yardage off initial contact. I don't think it's too far of a stretch to say he's probably slightly better than Genty, who was everybody's favorite ball carrier a year ago. And the fact he's playing at Notre Dame at a high level, playing good competition every week, even though they sneak Navy in there on occasion, I think really bodes well for Jeremiah Love.
17 total touchdowns, already 1,100 rushing yards, 1,135, 26 catches as well. And he's 215 pounds, Tony. He's not a small back with that explosiveness. So checks all the boxes there. All right, player number 5 on your list, the guy that was at the top of many lists to start the year. That was Auburn defensive end Kedrick Falk, 6'6", 285. The numbers don't jump out at you, just 2 sacks, 3 bats at the line of scrimmage, a fumble recovery. But he's only 20 years old, Tony, and he plays all up and down that line.
Yeah, very good athlete, incredible amount of upside. I'm disappointed that he's been spotty this year. He's been very inconsistent, as has that entire Auburn coaching team, which underwent a head coaching change in the middle of the season. I think he's got tremendous upside. I was expecting more off of the 2024 film when he seemed to be just take games over and he was unstoppable. Haven't gotten that this year. So that's going to be a question if he enters the draft during combine interviews. Why weren't you there week in and week out? Why weren't you there snap in and snap out? Walker's the kind of guy that if you draft him, you develop him, and the light goes on for him, you're going to hit a home run because he has got immense potential as a game-wrecking, game-controlling pass rusher who can also play off the line if you need him to on zone blitzes or get out into space in pursuit.
All right, and I think a similar conversation with his next guy, Tony, who was also near the top of many preseason lists. That's Clemson defensive tackle Peter Woods, 6'3", 315, but just 2 sacks on the year, and that whole Clemson defense is underachieved.
Exactly, and he's like Kendrick Falk in that he's more upside than he is production now. A guy that they line up at fullback on occasion. You see the movement skills, you see the athleticism, the mobility. He's more than just a gap occupier. He's more than just a guy that takes up space. He can make plays, but he hasn't done it on a consistent basis. As you pointed out, an underachieving Clemson defense, underachieving Clemson team seems endemic there as it is at Auburn. He's got a tremendous amount of upside. I think he's got the athleticism. If you want to play a true gap 3-man line, you could stick him out at end, put him on the inside in a 4-man line. Has a lot of upside. She's got to put the pedal to the metal.
All right, let's go to the next 2 guys. I'm going to put these 2 players together, Tony, because they play the same position. Your 7th and 8th players on this list. You have Spencer Fano, the right tackle for Utah, and then Francis Maui-Noah, the starting right tackle for Miami. Both players 6'6", Fano 302 pounds, Maui-Noah 315 pounds. So, again, 2 right tackles, not left tackles, in the top 10 here.
And, we saw with Armand Membo last year, the athletic right tackles are guys that can go relatively high. Now, some people think that Fano and Mwaga are going to be inside guards at the next level. I'm going to keep them out at right tackle until they prove they can't play like right tackle. They're both pretty similar. They're both relatively athletic. I think Fano's a little bit stronger than Mwaga, but Mwaga's also better on the second level, better in motion. They're also very mobile. Pass blockers. There's some room for improvement. I like their upside. And again, I'm going to leave them at tackle until they prove otherwise. Well, people have already pushed them into guard.
All right, let's go to player number 9 on your board, Tony, who might end up being the first player taken in this draft, depending on who gets the first overall pick. And that is Indiana quarterback Fernando Mendoza, who's had a heck of a year. He's 6'5", he's 225, he's got the size, has completed 73% of his passes, over 2,600 yards, 30 touchdowns, just 5 picks. Indiana has some ways to go still. They're going to have to play some better opponents, and we'll see how he does against, teams like Ohio State and Texas A&M. They get the college football playoffs and all that stuff. But he has checked every single box so far this year.
Had a rough start to the Purdue game this week after that Penn State game, and then he just blew Purdue out the last 3 quarters. I think they got one more it was Wisconsin this weekend. I'm sorry. Wisconsin this weekend, they started slow. Then they finally blew them out the last 3 quarters. I think they play Purdue. Then it'll be Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game, Big Ten title game. That's a game to key on. Now, here's the thing about Mendoza, and we were both in agreement. Early on, he had great stats, but it was a lot of easy throws. It was a lot of receiver screens, a lot of short passes. There weren't a lot of NFL-type throws. You didn't have to make them. Had that Iowa game, where if you look at the stats, it was a 49-yard reception to Elijah Surratt at the end of the game to beat Iowa, when in essence it was a 5-yard crossing pattern, and Surratt broke the tackle and went 45 yards. But that Penn State game really showed me a lot about Mendoza. I mean, that was such an enjoyable game to watch, and the fact that they were up early, then they were down, and it looked like they were going to lose to Penn State in Penn State, where the Penn State defense was finally starting to play up to a level that everyone expected all season, and he was able to drive them down the field with a lot of cool, a lot of calm, and make that pass to Omar Jones in the end zone, which was a great catch, but it's also a really good pass. That showed me a lot about Mendoza. He's getting great coaching from Kurt Cignetti. Anybody who watches this show knows that I love Cignetti. I think he's the best coach in football, pro or college. I think he's shown a lot. There's a lot there. He's got size. He's got the size that a lot of the other quarterbacks don't have. He's got the arm, and he's starting to show a pro game. The question is, does he enter the draft? Does he take a big NIL deal and go back to Indiana for another year under Cignetti? It's going to be interesting. But I think his improvement and that Penn State game, going to Penn State and that last drive really just showed me a lot.
All right, let's go to pick number 10 here, Tony, the last player in your top 10. And that's a guy we've talked about here over the course of the year, and that's David Bailey, the very talented edge rusher out of Texas Tech. This is an edge class that has a lot of bigger players. This is more of your traditional twitchy, stand-up, get after the quarterback, outside, stand-up linebacker, 6'3", 250, 12.5 sacks this year, 2 forced fumbles. He's a sack in every single game, Tony, this year, except for 2. So he's been consistent as well.
And how many games has he had multiple sacks? I mean, the guy's unstoppable. Stanford transfer. And, you talked about Avril Reese as your pass rusher. Bailey's, I think, is a 3-4 pass rusher that you can drop off the line and play in space on occasion because he has that athleticism. He has the mobility. He has the ability to, stay with tight ends on occasion down the field. I don't know if he's got the ball skills, but he's shown the athleticism to drop off the line, play in space, or make plays out laterally in pursuit, running down the ball carrier. But the fact is he's shown himself to be a tremendous pass rusher. He was good last year at Stanford. He's been great at Texas Tech this year and has really boosted his draft stock.
All right, player 11, Tony, Anthony Hill out of Texas, an inside linebacker we've heard about for a long time, 6'3", 238, 70 tackles. He fills up the stat sheet, man. 4 sacks, 3 forced fumble, a couple of interceptions, and a pass breakup.
And he plays like that. I mean, it's just not opportunistic stats. If you watch the guy, he plays like his hair's on fire, a little bit smaller, but he's great in pursuit, fast laterally, goes sideline to sideline, covers a lot of area on the field, really plays with a vicious attitude. Got nicked up last Saturday in the Texas game. Hopefully he's back at full steam this week. A little bit shorter. There may be some mismatches in coverage, but he gets depth on his pass drops. And he attacks the opponent, and you got to love that in a smaller pursuit, run and chase type linebacker.
All right, back to that Clemson defense next, Tony. Other guy that was in the top 10 for most people. He checks in at 12 on your board. Outside linebacker T.J. Parker, again, a little bit of a bigger guy, 6'3", 265, 2 sacks on the year. But again, much like the rest of that Clemson defense, as I mentioned earlier with Woods, has just underachieved.
He's been a ghost this year. He's disappeared. You can't find him, and it's sad because I thought entering the year, potential top 8 pick. Now he's got potential top 8 ability, but he hasn't shown it for all the reasons that you mentioned. We talked about his teammate Peter Woods, not showing up or showing up in spurts. When he makes plays, you see the explosion off the snap. You see the change in direction, the ability to immediately alter his angle of attack and get to the quarterback. You see speed in every direction. There's a lot of things there to like, but unlike David Bailey, unlike Avril Reese, his game seems to be going, Parker's game seems to be going in reverse rather than improving, and that is often a serious red flag for teams.
All right, let's go to player 13 on your list here, Tony. We talked about it a bit earlier, so we don't have to spend a ton of time on him. That's Ty Simpson. I was going to ask you about his size, but you already talked about that a lot when you talked about the Alabama-Oklahoma game. Just 6'2", 208, will probably come in a little smaller than that. 67% completions, just under 2,800 passing yards, 22 touchdowns, just 2 picks. But, Tony, for me, given the small body of work, it's his first year starting. I'm assuming Alabama is going to figure out a way to wiggle their into the college football playoffs anyway. Everything he does gets magnified because there isn't a huge body of work coming behind it. So every time he either plays really well or plays really poorly, I could see that really swaying NFL decision makers one way or the other.
And the fact is, except for the running game, because Alabama struggled running the ball this year, Jam Miller has not come through. He's got a good offensive line blocking for him. He's got some fantastic receivers, some game breakers at receivers. You saw the tight end Cuevas play a huge role. And I think you got to give Simpson credit to that extent because he uses all his targets and he uses them well. But you're absolutely right. I mean, the teams learn from the mistake of Mac Jones and Trey Lance, guys who have a very limited body of work. I mean, it's going to be much easier for Ty Simpson to stay in college if they give him a $10, $12 million NIL deal. And I think it would be great for him to go back to college to get another year under his belt at Alabama, who's got a great quarterback coach there. But the NFL is a magnet, and he's made a lot of good NFL passes. I mean, he makes some terrific throws. The deep accuracy, as we spoke about last week with Ryan Miller, is a concern. You saw that this weekend. In fact, during the broadcast, they talked about the deep accuracy being a concern. It's not because he lacks the arm strength. It has to do with his footwork, his trajectory, some of the mechanics of throwing the ball deep. Though he can make it, but he makes a lot of NFL type passes. Very impressive. I mean, no one was talking about Ty Simpson before the season began, and here we are now talking about him as a potential top 20 pick. That by itself is a story.
Yeah, he has an NFL arm. He can make all the throws. The deep ball issues is not an arm strength issue. He throws with anticipation. He does check a lot of boxes, which is why you have him as a guy with a first-round grade. The final first-round grade, Tony, is a guy that not many other people have in their top 30 or top 40 or top 50, but it's a name that we've been talking about on this show for probably 3 years now, I think, and that's Harold Perkins out of LSU. The problem with Perkins, Tony, is that he's a bit of a tweener. He's 6'1", just 222 pounds. He has 4 sacks, a couple of picks this year, 3 pass breaks up, 23 tackles. Where do you think he fits? Because I don't think there's any doubt he's playing really high level.
I'm going to die on the vine with Harold Perkins, okay? He is my Oronde Gadsden of this year. Now, Oronde Gadsden, I went to bat for. I said he should have been a third-round pick. I think he was a sixth-round pick, but look how well he's doing. So Harold Perkins could end up as a third-round pick, but, when he's playing great as a rookie and a sophomore, I'm going to say, see, I told you should have been the first round. I think he fits well as a inside linebacker in a 3-4. I think that's what his forte is. He's a little bit smaller, as you pointed out, but he gets from point A to point B incredibly quick. He's fast in pursuit. You like those guys that can run to the ball. We've seen the Ravens in the past take those type of linebackers in the first round. I think he's a great fit for that system. He may be small, but he doesn't play small. I mean, he throws his body around. He'll sacrifice himself to make the tackle. He can rush the passer, although that may be an issue at the next level. I absolutely think he's a one-gap linebacker and a devastating playmaker on Sunday.
All right, now our next group of guys here, Tony, these are your kind of hybrid end of first round, top of second round grades. So technically not full first round grades, but they are guys that usually do sneak into the first round. We'll get to those in a second, but first a reminder that draft season is presented by Moody's, a proud partner of the New York Giants. Decode risk, unlock opportunity. Learn more at moodys.com. And the first guy in this grouping, Tony, is a teammate, and this is player number 15 you're up to, by the way, so we're done with pure first-round grades after 14 players. Mansour Delane, cornerback out of LSU, transfer from Virginia Tech, right? And he's been great this year. I mean, he's been the best cover corner in the country, Tony. 10 PBUs, 2 interceptions. He's 6 feet tall. The problem is he's not long. He's got short arms, and he's probably not going to run all that well, but if he plays this well, does it matter?
It shouldn't, but you're right about that. You talk about he's not going to run that well. A year ago, when he was at Virginia Tech, and I was talking to people whether or not he was going to enter the draft, they were telling me, well, he may not break 4.6 in the 40. And I'm watching this guy. I'm like, he's a low 4.5 guy. I don't know where to get this 4.6 from. But the fact is, he does it in zone. He does it back off the line of scrimmage. He does it in man coverage. He shows great instincts. And he showed these skills as a sophomore at Virginia Tech when he first jumped on my radar. He's got terrific ball skills. I think you can use him in a variety of systems. It may be an instance where he doesn't test all that well, and the combine numbers aren't at the top, and people poo-poo him because of that. Watch the film. Go back and watch it when he was a sophomore at Virginia Tech. You can see that this guy's got NFL-type ball skills.
And Tony, I fell into the trap last year with Kamari Lassiter. I'm not going to do that again. Lassiter, same deal. His tape was phenomenal. He was a really good college corner, and the lack of speed didn't necessarily show up when you watched him. You didn't see elite speed, but he never really got ran by, or at least didn't get ran by a lot. And I think we'll be having a very similar conversation with Delane.
Absolutely. And at a critical position where it's up in the air this year. I mean, there's no top 10 cornerback. You're probably not going to get a cornerback drafted until the second half of round 1, and then it's anybody's guess. And then as we've seen in past drafts, there are a lot of surprise picks at the cornerback position as the first round closes out.
And again, corner is a stopwatch position as much as any other in the draft. So we'll see how that goes for Mansour Deland, who again has played great. All right, another Ohio State player, Tony. There's a reason they're ranked number 1 in the country, and their defense is unbelievable. Linebacker Sonny Styles, who was really good last year. He could have came out last year. Would you have been a second round last year, Tony? Sonny Styles, if he came out?
Correct.
So really good player, 6'4", 243, couple pass breakups, 32 tackles. But look, him next to Arvell Reese this year, they've both been phenomenal. Styles will be a first-round pick, and there's not much he can't do.
Yeah, I mean, has improved his game, not to the extent of Arvell Reese, but you see him, he's omnipresent on the field. He can blitz the quarterback. He makes a lot of big plays behind the line of scrimmage, but he also shows a lot of range. He goes sideline to sideline. He can cover the pass, a former safety. Doesn't have that elite speed, but he's fast enough, and he's just an imposing-looking guy out on the field at the linebacker spot. And the thing about Styles is he just seems to keep getting better and better and better, which is a major positive.
And, Tony, it's going to be a battle to see who the top cornerback is in this draft. We talked about Delane. We talked about Avion Terrell a little bit earlier in the show. His brother Terrell is also with the Falcons. He's a really good NFL corner who had previously gone to Clemson as well. 5'11", 180, you talked about the size, but 9 pass breakups this year. He also has 3 sacks as a blitzer, believe it or not, 4 forced fumbles. So I think he plays a little bit bigger than his size, but I do wonder if he's going to end up being the first cornerback taken. Or, and you could talk about this guy too if you want here, a guy that you left off your list is Jermon McCoy out of Tennessee, who hasn't really played this year, but he's a little bit bigger, really productive in 2024, but it's coming off a bad knee injury.
Well, let's go and stay with Terrell first. I mean, Terrell is a guy who makes plays with his back to the ball, and he does it very well. He doesn't do a lot of face guarding. He gets his head back around and tracks the pass in the air. And you know, he's got real good ball skills. The fact that he's not 6 foot tall, the fact that he's probably not going to be 5'11", teams are going to have to sort that out and figure that out. But he's got really good ball skills. Now, you mentioned one of the guys that's not on my list. That's on everybody's top 15 list, and that's Jermon McCoy. There's a serious injury there. I liked his film. I didn't love his film off of 2024. I did not have him as a first rounder coming into the season.
Okay, wow.
So the fact that he hasn't played this year, sure as heck, I'm not going to have him as first rounder now. If we could assume he's not going to take the field this year and he enters a draft, I'll have to go back and watch the 2024 film extensively, more so than I did over the summer, to get my final grade on him. I was not as high on McCoy as other people were coming into the season. The fact he hasn't played a game this year, there's no reason for me to put him in my top 25.
Yeah, to speak to the draft class again, I've seen him and guys that we respect a lot, like Dane Brugel, who's been on our show. He's in his top 10, in his top 50. So a lot of people do think highly of him. That'll be something that we'll watch closely in the postseason process, Tony, to see if he does any all-star games, if he's healthy enough to do that, whether or not he runs at the combine. These are all things that we'll keep an eye on with McCoy.
And they've got to be careful because, you know, they can't get intoxicated with all these, you know, top 15, top 10 picks, you know, in November and December. He's going to have to, if he enters the draft, they're going to have to do a lot of homework before he even decides to enter the draft. Better do the homework and talk to the right people rather than say, hey, well, I was, you know, the 8th pick in this mock draft and the 12th pick in this mock draft, because that can be deceiving sometimes.
Yeah, look, just go back to last year, right? Siobhan Ravel, Tony, is a guy that had a knee injury, and me and you had him at the end of the first round, top of the second, right? He ends up dropping all the way to the 3rd round because of the knee. So it's something.
And he was playing well. You remember, he played the first month in 2024, and he played well. He showed a lot of progress in his game.
And he finally played his first game, by the way, for the Cowboys yesterday against the Raiders. So he finally got back on the field and played okay in the snaps that I saw him. I didn't watch the tape or anything, but on the TV copy, look, he did a nice job. All right, we're back to Ohio State here, Tony. Boy, there's a reason they're really good, huh? We're still in the first/second round grouping here. Wide receiver Carnell Tate, a guy we've talked about a bunch here. Doesn't have a huge volume of catches. There's 39 catches, but it's 711 yards. So just do the math. That's almost 20 yards per catch. 7 touchdowns, 6'3", 195. And he is just the next guy in an assembly line of wide receivers at Ohio State that kind of are in the shadow of Jeremiah Smith, but end up being really good wide receivers themselves.
Well, you mentioned it. I mean, when you're playing next to Jeremiah Smith, when you have the running game, that Ohio State produces year in and year out, you're only going to get so many opportunities. And the thing about Tate is he makes the most of his opportunities. That sounds cliche, but you go back and you watch the college playoffs last year. You watch the game film this year. He makes a lot of important catches on third down. He makes a lot of
contested catches too.
And comes out with the contested catches. He's not super fast, but he's sneaky fast. He shows a way to get downfield. He doesn't have mental lapses. He doesn't have bad drops. There's a lot to like about his game. And, we were saying a lot of the same things about Emeka Egbuka at this point last year in the lead up to the draft. And look how he's done as a rookie first-round pick for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
And as the taller guy at 6'3", I think he changes directions really well. Sometimes those guys can be a little bit stiff. Cardinal Tate does not look stiff when you watch him on tape.
Absolutely. And he catches everything. And he's fundamentally sound. He catches the ball, extends his hands, catches the ball away from his frame, looks the ball in, and, as I said, makes a lot of important catches, not just big play catches, but third down and 6, third down and 8. He's coming away with the ball.
And look, I hate helmet scouting, but you can't go wrong picking Ohio State wide receivers. They rarely fail in the National Football League. All right, let's go back to Texas A&M, Tony. In fact, we talked about the team. This is the first Texas A&M player that we're listing here, checking in at pick number 19, which, again, I think give Mike Elko credit. Not a ton of, super high prospects on that team that are coming out this year at least. But Cassius Howell, you have him at 19 here, Tony. 6'2", one of those smaller edge rushers, 248 pounds. He's been very productive. I'll put him in the David Bailey type of class of player. 11.5 sacks, 6 pass breakups, a forced fumble, 25 tackles. Just not the biggest guy on the edge.
You talk about Elko. Good offensive lines, good defensive lines, right? We had the two Texas A&M Aggies, one going the first round last year. The other guy, Scourton, I believe, was the second-round pick. Howell's the next guy up. And coming into the season, I thought third round, but he gets better and better. He's making an impact. He's doing a good job against top tackles in the SEC. And he's somewhat between Avril Reese and David Bailey. He's not as good a pass rusher as David Bailey, but he's very good. He's not as good in space as Avril Reese, but you can play him in space. You see him time and time again in pursuit, running down the linebacker, running down the ball handlers, and making the tackle. Comes out of a 3-point stance, stands over tackle, destroyed the kid from Missouri in that game. When it was obvious there that he wasn't going to be a left tackle, is because Cassius Howell was all over him. Has shown a lot of improvement, and he's an impact player that opponents have to game plan around every time he's on the field.
All right, let's go to Caden Proctor next, Tony. It's a guy we've talked about a bunch. Left tackle for Alabama. We'll see if he's a tackle in the pros, but just his size, man. He's listed at 6'7", 366. I wouldn't be surprised if he's heavier than that. And it's just a matter of whether or not he can put all those athletic skills together.
And you see him in motion. He's not just a small, shows a little bit of stiffness, doesn't have the great lateral range footwork off the edge, but straight ahead, he can block in motion. He can get out to the second level and annihilate linebackers. The size, as far as I'm concerned, is going to be an issue. It has been with some of those offensive tackles that have come out of Alabama. You can't be too big because guys are so quick and explosive on Sunday. But I like his game. I like his pass protecting skills. I like his ability to block motion. I like his strength. Once he gets his hands on opponents, it's game over because he annihilates them. I just think he's going to have to do it on the right side.
All right, let's go to our next player, Chris Brazzell, the wide receiver out of Tennessee, Tony. 6'5", 200 pounds, big play receiver, 52 catches, 873 yards, 8 touchdowns, almost 17 yards per catch. All of his reps have come outside, which to me makes him a little bit different than the Jalen Hyatt thing from a couple years ago when he spent so much time in the slot off ball. Look, he's big, he's fast, he catches everything, he moves well for a guy that size, he's twitchy coming in and out of breaks. You should have to figure out whether or not that Tennessee offense and what he does there can translate to the pros.
Yeah, and he's got to improve his route running. He's got to polish his route running. Doesn't get off the line very quickly. Takes a while. He's got more built-up speed, but he makes a lot of big downfield catches. I mean, he's slightly better than Dante Thornton, who I thought was terrific last year at Tennessee. He's taken over for him. The ability to get up and high point the pass over defenders because of his length, because of his arm size, and he catches the ball well too. Like Tate extends his hands, makes the catch away from his frame. You like that.
All right, let's go to our next player, the last player in your second round category, C.J. Allen, another off-ball linebacker, Tony. 6'1", 235, 40 tackles, 3.5 sacks, 3 pass breaks, couple of forced fumbles. Unfortunately, he suffered a knee injury last week. It doesn't sound like the season's over. Kirby Smart seemed to indicate he could make it back at some point in the college football playoffs, depending on how far Georgia goes, or maybe before then, we'll see. But he's a guy that you want a guy that can stop the run line of scrimmage. C.J. Allen's your guy.
And we've seen a lot of pass rushing linebackers come out of Georgia recently. He's more the complete off ball linebacker. He can blitz when you need him to, although that Georgia pass rush has been a little bit depressed this year. It's not up to par compared to prior years. But again, I mean, this is his second year. He's shown improvement this year. Really good 3rd and 6. You need him to stack against the run if it's opponent run. You need him to cover the running back or the tight end in coverage. He can do all that, and he's done it well.
All right, and then the last 3 guys on your list, all at second-round grades as of now, Tony, are wide receivers. And that, by the way, makes, I believe, 5 wide receivers in your top 25, which is more than any other position, depending on how you want to separate the linebackers out, inside linebacker, outside linebacker, edge rusher, whatever. But you got Mekhi Lemon out of USC, who had a big game last week, over 150 yards against Iowa, 5'11", 195. He's more of a guy that plays in the slot. Then you have Casey Concepcion, who we mentioned from Texas A&M. 5'11", 190, 47 catches, 787 yards. He plays both, but more outside. And then Jordan Tyson at Arizona State, who's dealing with another injury, unfortunately. Yeah. With 6'2", 200 pounds. He's been difficult to cover all year.
And a lot of people have Jordan Tyson as their number 1 receiver. He's a real good receiver, but he's been on the sidelines with injuries literally, since the playoffs last year when he didn't play because he was injured. Now he's missed almost a month. I may be wrong on that, but he's missed a bunch of games because of injuries this year. That's a major red flag, especially for a guy that's not really that big. He's a thinner guy, or he's a smaller guy. He doesn't have great speed, great pass catcher, outstanding route runner. Really like his game, but the durability is a question. Mekhi Lemon, can't stop him. I mean, he's a guy who's watched his game take off this year. He runs excellent routes. He separates. He catches the ball well, and he shows big playability. Casey Concepcion, I was thinking about this morning. He's more and more like the Matthew Golden. I see him as the Matthew Golden from this year. Matthew Golden, who made a big leap up draft boards last year. I think it's the same with Concepcion. Now, Golden ran better routes than Concepcion, but Concepcion is a much more of a home run hitter. He's a guy who is just explosive as a receiver. He's great as a return specialist. He's getting better and better each and every week. Opponents can't stop him, and he's a big play guy that, again, he was on the radar coming into the season, but he's played way beyond expectations at a priority or a position that everybody wants in the NFL. Going back to what you said, 5 receivers in my top 25, I think that's indicative of how the offensive tackle class has been disappointing this year, and the quarterback class has been disappointing. Because if we go back to September and we did a top 25, I don't think there was, maybe Carnell Tate was only the top one guy that could have been a top 25 player, the only receiver that would have been a top 25 player. So I think it's indicative of these guys have played well, but the top players at positions that we thought would be strengths have not come through in 2025.
All right, Tony, let's take a look at the upcoming week. And now those are your 25, by the way. So, take one guy, good list. Oh, yeah, Tony, I forgot. Before we look ahead, we have to talk about the guys that just were off. You're right. My bad. We already talked about a couple of them. Jermon McCoy. Lenore Sellers, another guy that didn't make your list. We talked about him earlier in the show. But 2 guys that you want to focus on, one from Alabama and one from Oregon.
Well, I mean, Dante Moore from Oregon isn't there, and a lot of people love him. He's going to be all over the place. I like him as a college quarterback. He makes a lot of electrifying plays on Saturday. I just think it's going to take some time for that to transition to Sunday. We talked about Ty Simpson of Alabama with the small body of work. Dante Moore is in that same sort of position. We talked about Ty Simpson not being a big body passer. Dante Moore is in that same sort of position, although he's a little bit more mobile, more of an RPO quarterback. I just think that he's got upside, but he's far from NFL ready. And, the way I see it with Monte Moore, real good Saturday quarterback. It's going to be a boom or bust on Sunday. That's my concern with him. LT Overton has been a playmaker at Alabama this year. A lot of people have him top 25. Is he a defensive end? Is he defensive tackle? Kind of that funky sort of in-between defensive lineman. It's like you would talk
6'5", 6'5", 278.
right, which means he's probably going to be about 6'4", 270 pounds, and sort of that Harold Perkins on the defensive line spot.
Nothing makes me happier than Tony doing the predicting of the actual height and weight based on what the listed height and weight is. I think it's great. You kind of always minus an inch at around 10 to 12 pounds, which I always enjoy. Couple guys I want to ask you about, Tony. No tight ends on this list. If you were to, who is your top tight end, and how high do you think he's going to go in this year's draft?
I know a lot of people love the Oregon tight end, and he's been good in spots. He's had some injuries.
He goes so very young, by the way. He's only 20 years old.
He's my number one tight end, but I have him as a mid-second round pick right now.
Okay.
I just he hasn't really stepped up. I like Jack Andrews a lot from Texas, but he's also been spotty. Max Clare of Ohio State has come up big in spots for the Buckeyes. But again, we talked about Carnell Tate not getting the ball because of Jeremiah Smith. And then you factor in that Ohio State Buckeye running game. And the fourth man on the list is Max Clare, the tight end. So, he's suffered from a lack of opportunity, although he's got upside. Tanner Koziel, we talked about him with Mike Runner a lot from Houston. I mean, I don't see maybe somebody falls in love with Kenyon Sadiq that needs a tight end and he goes in the first round. But I think right now, Sadiq is more upside than actual production and polished football.
All right, let's go ahead, Tony, to the previews of this week's game. And boy, it is a sleepy college football week. There's one game in the ACC with Georgia Tech that's okay, but USC's in another game. I think that's halfway decent, but not a lot of big time games this week, Tony. It's like the big programs have brought in their second money games this week to come in and they'll pay the check and they'll get a little bit of a second bye week almost. But you're excited about Baylor and Arizona. Why?
Well, just to get back to your point, remember, the Saturday after Thanksgiving is rivalry weekend. So Ohio State plays Michigan, Texas, you got all those rivalry games, and they kind of, like you say, take a break, to get ready for those rivalry games after Thanksgiving. Baylor against Arizona, I mean, this is a game that only draft nicks or draft analysts would love. The Baylor passing game has been terrific this year. They got a real good late-round quarterback in Sawyer Robertson. It's very accurate. They've got a bigger receiver that's going to go day three, Josh Cameron, and they got a tight end H-back who's got a ton of catches. He's going to be a day three pick, Michael Trigg. The Arizona secondary's got two really good prospects to keep an eye on. One we've spoken about on this program a couple times, Genesis Smith, the safety. 1 interception, 7 pass breakups. He's more than a straight line safety. He goes sideline to sideline, shows great range in center field. And Tre'Don Stoops, who was graded as a mid-round pick by NFL scouts, 2 interceptions and 6 PBUs. If you watch Baylor football the past decade, they love to put the ball in the air. Arizona in Genesis Smith and Tre'Don Dukes has got 2 legitimate NFL defensive back prospects to keep an eye on. It's going to be a big challenge for them.
All right, then we like Arkansas and Texas.
Well, we talked last week with Ryan Miller from CBS about Winston Bruce. I'm sorry?
Ryan Wilson.
I apologize. Sorry, Ryan. About Quincy Rhodes. I mentioned him as a riser. 15 tackles for loss, 8 sacks. Everybody seems to love Trevor Goosby, the left tackle of Texas, who's really taken over after their the 2 starters from 2024 now in the NFL. Going to be a big matchup, big challenge for Goosby. He's athletic, he's mobile, but when I watch Goosby play, he's always bending at the waist and overextending in the blocks. If he does that against Quincy Rhodes, Rhodes will eat him up. This is a big one-on-one matchup as far as scouting is concerned. I think Texas is going to win the game big time. Texas-Arkansas, which back in the day used to be a great rivalry. That matchup between Rhodes and Goosby, 2 younger NFL prospects, is one to key on.
All right, and next week, folks, we'll be back. We're going to do some questions from fans. We will have a show Thanksgiving week. It'll come your way on Tuesday, as always. So that'll be fun. Make sure you get your questions in for draft season. We'll have another couple topics as well as we move forward here in the draft process. Tony, you mentioned only really 3 weeks left of real college football week. So you have this week, you have rivalry weekend to your point. Then you have the conference championship games. And then you have the extended playoff format. So we're going to get into that. There'll be a lot of fun things to talk about with those teams in the college football playoffs. And we'll see where we go from there. Tony, always fun, my friend. It's a pleasure.
Thanks, John. We'll see you next week.
That's draft season presented by Moody's, coming to you from the Hack and Sack Meridian Health Podcast Studio. Keep getting better. For Tony Pauline, I am John Schmelk. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you next time, everybody.